I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller. My special guest today, the Lancaster Police Chief, Don McDaniel.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm looking forward to it.
Glad you're here. Glad you're here.
Great.
I'm sure it's been a topsy-turvy couple months for you. You were appointed in July?
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting, and it has been topsy-turvy. A lot of things happen when the chief of police gets promoted. You have to promote captains, lieutenants, sergeants. So there's been a lot of changes in the supervision and assignments, and so people have to figure out what shift they're going to and what their job's going to be. So there's a lot involved when a chief is promoted.
Now, the chief before you?
Dave Bailey.
Dave Bailey, and Dave retired and has moved on.
Right, he retired. He's working for the state of Ohio now.
So is this something you wanted to do when you were a little kid growing up, say, I want to be police chief? Because you've been with the Lancaster Police Department for, what, 28 years now?
28 years. You know, when I was growing up, I wanted to go into the military, which I did. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. Coming home, I then kind of got the idea that being a police officer sounds kind of neat. Saw an ad in the Eagle Gazette, took the civil service exam for the Lancaster Police Department, was hired, and I kind of wanted to be a sergeant. That's kind of where I wanted to be, and being in the right place at the right time, I was promoted to sergeant fairly quickly, and I thought, well, maybe I could be a lieutenant one day. So here I am as chief, and we'll see how that goes.
Can you remember your first day on the job?
Oh, absolutely. I went to the Highway Patrol Academy, and the first day on the job really is coming back from the Highway Patrol Academy, being assigned to a field training officer program, and my field training officer was Bob Ankrum.
Oh, yeah.
He's now selling cars for Buckeye Honda, I believe.
Right.
And but yeah, absolutely. Every moment of it, I remember every moment of that first day. It was pretty exciting.
It's just in a nutshell, how have things changed in the police force, or just I know obviously more drastic crime, but just how has it changed for you?
Well, everything's changed, really. Technology has been the major difference in the way officers do their job today. For instance, when I came on, we shared portable radios. So when you came to work, you were assigned a radio. And this radio was so big, you pulled out an antenna. And sometimes the guy before you had broken it off and didn't bother to tell anyone, and you pulled the antenna off. And it was rather difficult at times to have the proper equipment. Today, all the officers have their own radio. It's a digital radio. There's computers in the cars. The dispatch center is computerized. Reports are generated via computer, and you have instantaneous access to information. We had to do everything over the radio, and you had to wait until the radio room made a phone call or checked something and provided that back over the radio. So officers can have that in their hands immediately.
Now, we talked a little bit off air about the radio room and 911 certification. Talk a little bit about the radio room, because that's pretty special to you.
It actually is pretty exciting. Over the last several years, one of the things that Chief Bailey had as a goal was to get our radio room accredited. And by accrediting our radio room, it opened up the ability to use some funding from the 911 tariff funding. Essentially what that is every time someone pays their cell phone bill, they're paying a small fee into a tariff that's used for maintaining the 911 system. So by getting our radio room accredited, we were able to expand the use of those funds for some of the things we were able to do with our radio room. New equipment, training, etc. And even in some cases, you can pay salary with that funding. So that was a goal, and what that did was over the last couple of years, all of our dispatchers have been trained in police, fire, and emergency medical dispatching. And that's actually a certification. They take the course, they're tested on it, they have to pass that certification, and then they maintain that by retraining every so often in that discipline. And then The accreditation agency will come in and evaluate our training and our practices. It involves grading each dispatcher monthly.
Is that every year they come in to do that? Or?
They come in every 2 years, so the accreditation is good for 2 years, but we have ongoing training and ongoing oversight of our radio room. That's going to be a state mandate at some point, and I think it puts Lancaster well ahead of the curve.
Yeah. How many dispatchers do you have?
We have 12 dispatchers, 4 on each shift. Obviously, it's a 24-hour operation. Very busy. It's a very busy room. It is really the first contact that the public has with the police.
Now, when we talk a little bit about dispatching and radios, and how many calls do you guys do a day, or a week, or a month, or?
Well, I can give you the annual stat is about 59 to 60,000 calls through the Lancaster Police Department Communications Center.
Wow.
It's significant. It's a lot more than most people would expect, but if you average that out, it's a pretty busy day. Our second shift, 3 to 11 p.m., is our most busy shift. Officers are more active during that time period, as you would expect, but we also have more officers assigned to that shift.
Sure. Now, talk a little bit about the force itself, how many there are.
Well, we currently have 66 sworn police officers. That includes the chief and all the supervisors. We're authorized currently at 69, or budgeted for 69. With the Chief Bailey retirement and Deputy Chief Patton retired, we have some openings which we're trying to fill, and we're hoping to get back to that 69 number sometime before the end of the year.
What you talked about, you started out as a patrolman and moved yourself up. Is that a testing process, or how does that work?
I can explain that to you. Essentially, we are a civil service community, which means that all of our promotions and hiring are controlled by a civil service commission. They administer testing for new hires as well as promotional exams. Our sergeant's exam is administered with a written exam followed by an assessment center. And what an assessment center is where outside group, in this case the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police, comes in and they evaluate our candidates and they rank them and they actually score them. So you take the written exam, combine it with the assessment center, and we get a ranking provided to the safety director, who's in our case, in the city of Lancaster's case, he's the appointing authority. And then we promote from that list. Lieutenants, captains, deputy chief, and chief is strictly an assessment center process. Same thing though, it's an assessment, and what that is a battery of testing. They do an oral presentation, a written presentation, maybe they have an in-basket exercise, what a chief or deputy chief might do on a daily basis, and then they challenge them to respond, and then they rank them according to a scoring mechanism put in place by OACP.
Advice you'd have for somebody that wants to become a police officer?
Well, I think if that's something you want to do, it's very important that you stay focused on your academics, because law enforcement is certainly an area where academically the expectations are pretty high. You have to know the law. You have to be a high school graduate in some cases. In most cases, you have to have a college degree. And then there's academy training and that. But also making sure you're physically fit, capable of performing the job, as it's an active job, jumping, chasing, climbing, etc. So staying physically fit, concentrating on your schoolwork, that type of thing.
Do you keep in contact with other cities?
Yes, I'm a member of the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police, as well as I've attended some trainings over the years. One in particular was Northwestern School of Staff and Command. It gives you an opportunity to work and train with people from agencies all over Ohio, so you establish relationships. So law enforcement is a closed field in that we rely on other agencies to support us, and they rely on us to support them. Fairfield County is fortunate in that I think we have some of the best, the working environment amongst the agencies in Fairfield County is just really good. Sheriff Phelan is outstanding, easy to work with. His department is a support for us in a lot of areas. We support them in a lot of areas. So the collaboration and the cooperation is outstanding here.
Talked a little bit about just working together. There have been if you had to change something, I mean, just for the better, say this is what I would like to do. I mean, just in the police, overall police procedures, or the community hears stories about these things that happen, but anything that you would, if I had a chance to change, even at the state level or the federal level, or
Well, one thing that we've done at the Lancaster Police Department, and Chief Bailey also initiated this program, we had some grant money last year, and we, actually it was about 2 years ago, we elected to buy body cameras for all our officers. And the investment in that was significant. But what it enables us to do is for each contact our officer has with the public, it's documented. You know, the officer wears it on his chest. It's, you know, feeding that back to a hard drive, and it can be reviewed should there be a question. But, you know, what would we want to change? It would be nice if all officers throughout the state had access to that type of equipment. What it does is not only it allows the officer to show from his perspective what happens, but it also protects the public. And I think, you know, what you're referring to is some of the nationwide news about this use of force or that, you know, officer-involved shooting. This would document that, and it would be pretty clear what happened, at least primarily focused on the officer's perspective. But it's, you know, oftentimes two camera angles are different.
Right, right. Do you follow the national news? I mean, do you keep in touch with other police departments about what they're doing differently?
Yeah, and that's some of the collaboration we were speaking about. But Governor Kasich put a task force together as a result of some of the shootings in Ohio. We had one in Dayton where a young man was shot in a Walmart, and we had one in a park in Cleveland that you know, reached the national news, and they were significant. And Governor Kasich felt that he should kind of find out if there's ways to improve training. And some of this is body cameras, some of it's training, some of it's focus on how to transition officers from, you know, the job is tough. Officers are asked to go out and handle difficult situations. They get information from the radio room and they arrive at a scene, and oftentimes that happens really quickly. They're out of the car and they're confronted by someone with a weapon. The body cam's one thing to document that, but also the training that we give that officer. He gets out and he finds out that what he was told on the radio wasn't accurate, that the situation that appeared to be a threat to a caller wasn't actually that. For instance, the Walmart shooting involved apparently some type of toy weapon or an airsoft gun, and the officers were told that it was an automatic weapon, and they went in there with that mindset. What we've tried to do is teach our officers they need to evaluate these things when they arrive, not rely solely on information provided over the radio or over phone or over a computerized message, and try to transition from I'm armed, I'm ready to go, back, holster the weapon, and now we have other options, whether it be, you know, speaking to the person or a taser or a, you know, pepper spray or something less than deadly force.
Talk a little bit about equipment that officers have. Talk a little bit about vehicles. I know that cars run 24 hours a day. Just talk a little bit about the equipment that officers have. You talked about body cams, but...
Well, you know, some of the things, you know, a cruiser is the officer's workspace. He's in it for his entire shift. She's in it for her entire shift. If you were to set in a police cruiser, you'd find a mobile data terminal, which is essentially a laptop, connected to our radio room and connected to a statewide network, feeding information back to that officer. He can feed information back to headquarters and communicate with the duty officer via that MDT, but also over the radio. So you have your MDT, you have a radio, you have obviously weapons, shotgun, rifle, ammunition, various other things police officers use. And as mentioned, that vehicle's in motion nearly 24 hours a day from call to call.
Now, when they talk about equipment, do officers have to buy their own equipment, or is it furnished to them, or?
We furnish almost all equipment for Lancaster. It's not that way at all departments, but for Lancaster and cities such as Lancaster, we typically provide all equipment necessary.
How often does a cruiser last?
They last about 3 years.
That's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Right, and when we're getting into the third year, it's difficult. There's a lot of extra maintenance involved, but we have some reserve vehicles that we're able to rotate in as we repair vehicles. But it's a constant struggle to keep a fleet up and running. And we have a fleet manager, that's Captain Dan Shupp, and it's his job to monitor the health of the fleet and make sure we're able to go every day.
Now, is it by engine hours or total mileage, or, you know?
Typically the mileage is but there's a lot of idle time involved in a cruiser, you know, sitting here, sitting there.
Right.
And from what we're being told, that's pretty tough on cars, and, you know, it does wear them out quicker.
What's an average cruiser cost? I mean, decked out, not just straight with all the equipment in it.
Because the state of Ohio has a state bidding process, you'd be surprised. It's about $25,000 for the purchase of the vehicle, and then another $4,000 to $5,000 for the equipment that goes into the vehicle. And it can be anywhere up to about $35,000, but it's pretty reasonable considering the type of vehicles that we drive.
You guys are involved in the community quite a bit. I mean, you have community outreach programs. Talk a little about just involvement the police department has with the schools and just the community in general.
Right. We're in the schools every day in a couple of ways. We still operate the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, the DARE program. We have 2 officers assigned to that, and that's their assigned duties during the school year. We also have a security effort in conjunction with Lancaster City Schools where we assign officers to various schools throughout the city of Lancaster every day. And then we're in Ohio University Lancaster on a security basis with a contract with them. So we're constantly at, and in addition, I should mention, we also have a grant funded by actually the U.S. government, but it's through the Ohio Department of Transportation. It's called Safe Routes to Schools. So I know that here at Fairfield Christian, we monitor the school zones throughout the community, but I know that we get some complaints about speeding on Columbus Street or Autumn Drive around the new Tarhee trails, and we try to monitor that.
I just saw this morning somebody stopped up here on Nelson Road. A cruiser had somebody that was about 7:15 or so.
Just trying to remind people school zones we need to slow down and be aware.
Just in general, we're talking about just police activities, the drug issue. I mean, it's phenomenal. Is this something that you even thought about 20 years ago or when you started?
Not at this level. You know, I think 20 years ago, heroin was big in the 70s. Most people know that, and heroin's made a comeback. And there's several reasons why heroin made a comeback. There's been a concerted effort by the drug cartels to bring it back. They've made it cheap. They made it stronger. They made it more addictive. And because it's cheap and addictive, it's very difficult for people to get off of heroin. So it's increased in Lancaster, but it's increased in Ohio and across the country. And, you know, we do several things. We do some education components. We're participants in the Major Crimes Unit. Mm-hmm. That is a joint task force involving Sheriff Phelan's office, the Highway Patrol, Pickerington PD. In addition, Athens County and Hocking County participate, as well as Athens PD, Logan PD, OU PD, wow. Nelsonville PD, and others. So that's a collaboration where we all work together to help the communities in Fairfield, Athens, and Hocking County deal with this drug issue.
People will talk about response time. You know, gee, I called and well, first they said, do I call the sheriff, do I call the police department, who do I call, and city limits, all that. Talk a little bit about response time, because it's pretty low, because I know I've called before, and it's pretty low.
Yeah, response time is pretty reasonable. I can't quote you a number, but we do study that on occasion. What I would tell you is in Lancaster, I'll just describe a typical day. When officers come in, there's a roll call. We call it inspection, but it's essentially a roll call. There's officers that are assigned to a geographical area of the community. We call them districts. So we typically have between 5 districts, 5 actual districts, and then we have a couple traffic cars and a couple backup cars. So we have the city divided in 5 parts, and that officer is responsible for calls in his area. When he's busy, then another officer might come in to help him in his area. That reduces response time. But we also have the ability that say the sheriff's office might not have, right, to have additional officers available, because we operate with between 6 and 11 officers on the street at a time. That helps our response time too. I mean, it's quite possible you could call 911 and we could be a half block away and be there in 30 seconds, or we could be several blocks away and it might take us a couple of minutes.
We talked just a little bit about the equipment, future things that you would like to see. I mean, again, if City Council said, okay, here's your budget, you know, we're going to give you X amount of dollars, then what would the police chief like to see? I mean, other than cruisers.
What all police chiefs are going to tell you, including this police chief, is more people. And what would you do with more people? Well, it's combat criminal activity. You know, some of the things you see when you have an issue with drugs, you see other crimes that are often related to drug activity, burglaries, robberies, car thefts, etc. I'd like to see a reinstitution of a directed patrol unit Chief Bailey was able to do that back in 2011. What that means is we took, in this case, 2 officers. We assigned them to a special unit. Sergeant Peters and Officer Morehouse were assigned to that unit, and they could target a specific area for a specific type of criminal activity. So if we're having burglaries in a certain area, those 2 officers were able to devote their entire shift to addressing that issue. Right now, if you have a problem at your house, you call and we send the first car available. The directed patrol unit would allow us to send people to actually be directed to patrol that specific problem. Then that problem can range from the drug activity to whatever it might be. And we would like to see, I would like to see that reinstituted and have the ability to address those problems in a more focused and with more time.
Do you give tours of the police station if people want to come through?
Yes,
or?
absolutely. Our community services unit, Sergeant Mike Peters, and his group, we schedule tours all the time and love to have the community come in and take a look.
Just a question. You talked about the new jail downtown. Will you guys hold prisoners there, or is that just for the county? Or
Yes. The new jail, and honestly, the Lancaster Police Department felt strongly that the jail needed to be downtown. There's several reasons for that. A lot of people may not know, but we are tasked with transporting prisoners to and from municipal court. And those are all prisoners. That's prisoners from Millersport to Pickerington. They belong to, once they come to the jail and they're housed at the jail, it's the Lancaster Police Department's responsibility to transport for municipal court. So Pickerington doesn't come and transport their prisoners. Millersport doesn't come and transport their prisoners. Baltimore doesn't, etc. We do. And the stat that, I'm confident the numbers, the minimum of about 4 transports for each individual that's incarcerated in jail to go to muni court.
Well, I mean, it's been great having you on. It's just, congratulations on a promotion and, the right guy for the right job. And we wish you the best of luck. And if there's anything anybody can do, let us know. We're just glad to have you. Any other websites you want to mention about the police department or anything that?
No, we have a Lancaster Police Department has a Facebook page. Like for people to like the page. A lot of information comes through our Facebook page, and we have a police department website that's linked with the city website.
Fantastic. Well, again, Don, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come in and talk to us, and we'll have you back on again. We'd like to get some more information about the softball update, too.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
That's a super event.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller. And remember, until we meet again, let's make a difference.
Pioneered what is now called outsourcing. And the Sidwells wanted a community that had a lot of churches, had a lot of soccer opportunities, their kids love soccer, and a good Parks and Rec department, so they chose Lancaster. And so in 1980, they moved the franchise here in Lancaster to 6th Avenue. But then in 2002, Todd George, current owner, purchased the franchise from them. And in 2004, he bought a building that's on Mulberry Street, and that's where the franchise is located currently. I'm Jay Johnson, General Manager of Service Master Clean by Todd George, where we guarantee if it's not done right the first time, we'll do it again.
Service Master Clean by Todd George, 740-687-1077, 740-687-1077.